You're listening to the Adventuring Party for the third week of December 2021. This week, maybe if you listen to the episode, you'll get that next skill advance a little quicker. The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way. Welcome to the party. I'm Warlord Scarr.
I'm Dave.
I'm Owen.
And I'm still Savage.
And I have been told, my gentle warriors, that in this land of RPGs, there still exists disparity. XP disparity, where Jamie has 350 XP from showing up to every session, but somehow Mary has gotten up to 475 XP through a variety of extra sessions that she didn't miss, and apparently some kind of diary thing. What is to be done about this inequality? The premise, the thesis of this episode is some RPGs and some groups will have, each person has their own XP track, but a lot of groups will just say everyone's on the same XP or everyone goes to the same level. What are the pros and cons of each thing? Is one just a artifact of the past, or is the other just a sign of modern day gaming laziness? See previous episode. So, will we start with initial thoughts?
Milestone XP sucks. There, I've said it.
That's a thought, I suppose.
I'm going with feelings. Yeah, this is sort of the question is, why is it we just all play Get Along Gang where everyone's the same level all the time and no one's ever left behind and no one actually ever gets rewarded for trying harder?
I'd hard to disagree with that premise, to be honest with you.
Except it's a lot of work.
Here's the thing: as a GM player who has slipped into just to make sure everyone's at the same level or the same XP out of convenience, I'm becoming disillusioned with the merits of that. I think for a small amount of bookkeeping, which isn't necessarily difficult in an age of digital devices being, the way we do our games these days, I don't think tracking is going to be that much of an issue. And honestly, if somebody's putting more work into a game, like writing diary entries, showing up regularly, role-playing better, they probably should be rewarded for that, and not just when the GM decides, oh, now the entire party has achieved enough in my book to level up. Also, the milestone XP system seems a bit arbitrary for reasons I just discussed, but it also kind of diminishes the party's incentive to try harder, as in, oh, we're just going to level up whenever the GM says, we're not going to try to push ourselves, like to get that extra XP, or... Yeah, so I suppose I'm definitely seeing more arguments for why you should have different amounts of XP.
The advantages of milestone XP, and for anyone who's wondering what the devil milestone XP is that instead of people reaching discrete amounts of XP, let's say you're in a level-based game and it takes 2000 XP to level, instead of being parceled out your XP in nice steaming 100 XP doses, you're told when you have completed this dungeon, your characters all reach level 3. It is quick, it is easy, the GM doesn't need to do a bunch of extra bookkeeping, the players don't need to record anything, they're just told you level when you level. It's good in a tightly balanced game because you know exactly what level the characters are going into exactly the set of encounters you set up for them. There are precious few RPGs where this is really useful information because most RPGs aren't terribly well balanced. But in the few that are, level-based, milestone-based ones are good because it's like this is, your assumed level is 9th at this point, so the opposition are all around 9th level opposition. And your assumed level is 10th, they're around 10th level opposition. It's good in Pathfinder 2nd edition. It's good when you don't want to worry too much about it. It's bad in that, again, your players can't go for extra credit. They can't go that little extra mile to get a bit more oomph in their progression. If they want, okay, this fight looks hard, can we get a bit more XP first so I can buy this talent, or I can buy this skill, or I can get this weapon before we go in there? You get what you get when you get it. So the pros and cons to it. It is simple. It does, relatively speaking, keep a pre-published adventure on track. but it's got the disadvantage of effectively how hard you play the game and how thoroughly you play the game doesn't really matter. You get the stuff when you complete the dungeon, not before.
So the initial vibe I'm getting off all of this is XP as a individually tracked thing is it appealing to GMs because it allows them to reward additional effort. And that's just like, whatever the GM's standards for good play or additional things, that is, they want to be able to reward that. But the problem with rewarding something is that if you're the wrong state of mind, a reward for one person can seem like punishment for the other. The classic being, oh, you're giving XP for every session attended. My child sometimes needs me to drive them to the hurley field, or my partner is sick, or my boss demanded overtime from me. Why am I being punished for life happening to me?
A couple of things there. There's two different sources of XP in that case. One has to do with attendance and presence at the table and maybe taking extra measures to enhance the game. The other is XP that can be wrung out of the system by the rules of the system. Now, you got to be real careful about which one you're going to use. Maybe don't use both. Also, what is the source of the XP? The XP, if we see XP as deriving from, as a measure of how pleased the GM is with you, then you're always going to get hurt feelings, because it's daddy is withholding, or mommy likes the barbarian more than the bard. The XP in a game comes out of the system. It is a function of how many things have you killed, how many gold pieces have you extracted, or how many clever decisions have you made that the writers of the scenario, if it's pre-published, have accounted for. If we're going to look at tracked XP, and let's say we're looking at, for the sake of convenience, we're looking at published material that someone has cast an eye over at least once, maybe even playtested, then in many ways it is milestoned in the sense that there should be enough XP in X number of encounters, be they social or exploration or combat, to get all of the characters involved to the next milestone, be it a level or a couple of advancements on their character sheet or whatever. And it's up to the people who write those campaigns and write those scenarios to make sure that that is there. And it's up to the people who write the systems that those campaigns are set in to ensure that there's an accurate guide to what doing these things is worth in terms of XP. Mix it in with, are you going to be on time? Did you bring snacks? Did you have a funny quote for your character? Did you roleplay well? The two together, I feel like oil and water can make a great salad dressing, but they will separate out, and there will be more of one than the other. So be careful about your balance.
So it's sort of a dichotomy between, say, a D&D where there's a fully brought out XP system there, and something more freeform like Savage Worlds was just like, yeah, you level up every session, every 2 sessions. So a lot of early 2000s had the, you get 1 XP for showing up, and 2 XP if you do something, and 3 XP if you actually achieve a goal. So there's sort of like a fight there between what is the system defining as XP versus what a DM, with their closer knowledge but also biases, will interpret as being achievement in a certain situation.
And the participation XP, and I'm not using that in a derogatory sense. I think that it has some worth in terms of getting people to the table if you've kind of undisciplined players. Those tend to occur in low XP formats where 1 or 2 points of XP can be quite important, whereas we're looking at sort of XP for killing monsters or getting gold or whatever it is, exploring starships.
We could look at all kinds of XP.
They could, yeah, but they tend to have quantities that are more in, well, there's 100 XP for killing this monster, there's 200 XP for finishing this social encounter successfully. There's a lot more granularity there. 1 or 2 XP there isn't going to mean anything. You'd have to award in units of much greater sort of quantity. I feel like anytime you're talking about you get 1 for showing up, those tend to be in low numbers of beans XP systems that have kind of advancement tracks that are similar. It'd be hard to get completely out of step with the other members of the game in those, whereas a couple of thousand XP between even 2 characters of the same class could mean the difference between a level and not a level, and with it the powers, abilities, spells, etc. and it might take a few sessions to smooth out that difference.
Assuming smoothing is the point, because it's like, if you are allowing a situation where someone might be busy for a month and thus fall behind by 1,000 XP or something, are you then going to give them opportunities for catch-up? I understand, like, withhold participation XP from the person who just decided not to show up for no reason. That's probably something you might be better off handling with, like, a conversation between adults.
Well, you can allow for it mechanically as well by saying if your character is playing with characters that are a level higher, you get a boost to the amount of XP you earn to rubber band you back into range.
Ah, yes, the third ed system.
Yeah.
The third ed system, I think, was actually good, but horrifically complicated for what it was trying to do. So, swings and roundabouts.
To elaborate what Shane's saying there, the third edition D&D had a chart where you earned different amounts of XP depending on the challenge rating that you were facing and what your own level was. And it wasn't linear, as in it was bounded by you're getting a bunch of you're getting the full XP for any monster for any appropriate challenge rating. But if you're facing something that's way too low for you, like a goblin when you're 10th level, or way too high, like the Tarrasque when you're just starting out, you're not actually going to get a much XP, if any, for overcoming those, because the idea is that if you're beating something that's way too low for you, it's not challenging you, it's not teaching you anything. And if you're fighting something that's too high, you're not learning anything because it's pure blind luck that's presumably gotten you success when it shouldn't be possible. So yeah, there's a framework there. If you're doing it with pen and paper, it's going to be a nightmare. Honestly, use spreadsheets, use calculators, because it will run much more smoothly. And honestly, somebody could come up with a cleaner version of this system.
Many video game RPGs do. They have various catch-up mechanics built into them and automatically calculated.
There's also a percentile reduction if you were not in your favourite class, as I recall. So if you multi-classed and your favourite class was like Druid and your level in Wizard was only 1, you would basically there was a penalty if there was too great a disparity between your different levels in your classes.
Yeah.
That didn't apply to prestige classes, but did apply to base classes.
Oh, gee, I wonder why prestige classes were so popular.
Yeah, so it becomes very clear that if you want to do this on a per-player basis, it gets complicated quickly. And that has been tested out in the past. But something Owen said towards the start has been scratching at me now, is like, there is a point to tracking XP, and the point is sometimes to challenge the players to go a little bit further than they would otherwise, to get over that next hump. And if you do that, if you can figure out a way to do that on a party basis, so you can keep we all level together. And let me just pull in the GMs quick here and say, listen, I think we all have to admit that one of the reasons we love milestone leveling is because you get applause at the table. Everybody's happy with you. The affirmation, the validation you earn for doing practically nothing is intoxicating. Okay.
You hand out your dopamine hit and get a small one in return.
Yeah, everybody's happy.
So here's one of the reasons why another reason why equalizing XP is bad. You remove a reward mechanism from your game. If you basically go everyone levels at the same time, you cannot hand out XP to players as a reward for doing something good or cool or something that enhances the game. Let's say a player, we're playing in person, and a player builds a battle mat or terrain for me, carves hills out of styrofoam, paints them, assembles them, builds some trees, arranges a whole battlefield so when you show up to the run of your game, you've got a battlefield built for you, which has happened in games. What does that player get for that?
What a legend.
Yeah, absolutely. It gets, round of applause on the table and everything. But what material gain does that player get for taking that real-time effort to produce that content for you and enhance the game?
I think there's a strong case to be made. It would be fairer to, give them XP. Or there are other ways to handle this. because I know Neoclassical Geek Revival has some interesting mechanics, such as gaining part of your next level at a time. So you you don't necessarily get your entire level as abilities all at once. You can get your one ability or one save increase, and maybe that player gets theirs a bit quicker.
Potentially.
My issue with taking out the XP is you're left then with just giving the players either treasure, which has its own progression issues, or in some games it's useless, in some games it's incredibly powerful, depending on what you can buy, or you give them meta-narrative currencies, which in some games are very limited what they do. Like if you go, oh cool, have a point of inspiration in 5th Ed. Alright, that works. Can't really give you a second one. So, we're kind of done here.
You can always give in-universe social advantages, like, you do the side quest for the Duke. He will send, 3 extra knights to go with you to back you up during the fight with the Dread Necromancer later. And that's when you get your milestone to beat the Dread Necromancer. So it is possible to come up with rewards for side questing.
Sure, but you've removed one of the core progression ones. And collapsing everything down to a single XP track does that. And if I give you an extra 100 XP in a class-based game, the question becomes, does that level a character faster or not? Do they hit level 2 before the rest of them hit level 2? Or are they going to end up hitting it the same way because the values are so high? So did I give them an appreciable amount of XP, or did I give them a token amount of XP? As you cut down on your progression tracks, you lose dials you can twiddle to reward player behavior. So when you go, okay, everyone's going to level at the same time, I can't give out XP anymore as a reward. If you then go, well, your progression is also linked to the level of the equipment you have. So if you don't get, or there's no differences in equipment really. People have what they have, like it's a gun. Guns are just guns. They do this much. They do 2d6 damage. You could have a rifle that does 3d6 damage. There's no mechanics in the game for having a rifle that does 3d6 plus 1 damage. So you just have a rifle. You've just got what you've got. Then I can add up maybe meta-narrative stuff. Maybe I can kludge together something in game. Oh, here's some hirelings to follow you around. But the player may not want hirelings, or the player may not be like, oh, why do I need to control these mooks? I'm a go it alone loner guy. So you're cutting down on what you can give out when you go to milestone leveling. You're narrowing your options for rewards. And GMs should be rewarding the behaviour they want to see in the game. So if one player, through no fault of their own, misses half your sessions and kind of shows up late and harassed because they've got a young kid, and then you've got another player who shows up early, who does the write-up, who contributes actively at all times, is always there, is always engaged, is it right to reward one player more?
To me, it sounds like a psychology thing. Like, some people will understand, say, oh yeah, Mary put in extra effort, she should get a little bonus, that's fine. Other people will see it as a punishment on them for life happening to them. That's sort of one of the things you're going to have to think is just like, you may need to adjust your reward structure to suit the party you're playing with.
So if someone has a very negative attitude about is more jealous than generous of spirit, we should give less rewards to the person who's earned them, because the person who's jealous will feel bad.
That's a question I think individual GMs and groups will have to answer.
Doesn't that suck?
It does kind of suck, yeah, but I'm taking the sort of extreme case in this, I guess.
Never great for making rules. Let's play with this idea a little bit. Okay, let's say, for example, that we take some of the elements of Milestone, some of the elements of Tracked XP, and play with them a little bit. How about the party earns XP? So they earn a big chunk. So a bit like Milestone leveling, they're earning the rewards together. And someone might have put in a little more effort or not. But here's where it gets interesting. The party then has to decide how they spend that collective XP on each of the party members. Now, and before listeners, because I know all these fine gentlemen are reasonable souls, before you jump at me, consider any game you've ever played where you get back to town with a bunch of loot, and the players immediately fall to discussing how it should be spent to optimize the party. And usually it'll be like, get the tank, the most expensive, best armor we can afford. almost regardless of anything else. Like, do we need to eat today? No, get the tank pauldrons. So players are already kind of tuned to take a collective resource and split it up unequally in a way that they can agree on. And I think you could do something similar with XP.
You absolutely could. Though you would have to have limits. Like, you can't put anyone to level 3 until everybody's level 2.
Yeah, that's fair.
You cannot go, you've one level 6 fighter and he is going to drag the rest of our level 1 asses through all the content.
But that's kind of, if players agree to it, it becomes an interesting challenge, because you're legitimately now allowed to throw level 6 monsters at the party, and they can, because they have a level 6 fighter. The rest of them will have to figure out...
But they'll all die.
Well,
and they'll be like, that was a terrible decision, guys. They're like, we were assuming you were just going to send level 2 people against us. And I said, yes, that's probably what I should have done, but I sent a level 6 guy to challenge you. He cast a fireball, and the rest of your all those lobies crisped up and blew away.
Well, what I would say is that there's probably some smart maths that can be done at the system side to figure out, well, okay, given that you've got this disparity because they've decided to front load their party with this guy, how might that play out in the game? Because I imagine it's different from having an even spread in the party, and different tactics will emerge. You'll be forced to try and use those other characters to support funneling monsters to the big guy. You know, lots of things you could... And maybe in time they'll discover, actually that wasn't a great idea. We better bring the other characters up to level now with the XP that we've got and try something else.
It does sound more dynamic.
The key idea being to, instead of it, again, GM gives out XP, everybody gets butthurt. It's more a case of, here's another resource for the party. Now the party decides how to spend it. And if you use the sort of tracked XP is in the world, should the party push on a little further in the hope of getting more XP to spend collectively at the end of the session? I think you could have a lot of fun with that and bring back some of the essence of what tracked XP has been about in the past without as much individual sort of fiddliness.
I feel like I've seen a subsystem like this probably in the Third Ed, because Third Ed was great for letting writers go mad with random variant rules. I'm pretty sure like PHB2 or something had like a system for like party teamwork benefits, but I'm not sure if you spent XP in them or like you had to spend extra skill points. My brain is... that was a long and misty time ago.
Yeah, it's probably not entirely new ground, but I think it neatly gets us to that magical third way where you can still probably get the dopamine hit if you give them enough XP.
I mean, you could also have a thing where like if you have this sort of XP shared pool, maybe there's like some of the XP is per person just on the normal track, some person is, and some of the XP is put in the pool. That sort of brings around the spectre of the infamous burning XP for like rerolls or other one-off effects. Which the argument against that is always, well, the people who need to reroll are generally the people who have already fallen behind, and that traps them in a cycle. But maybe you could have a system where, like, if someone is like 1,000 XP ahead, maybe the GM could start offering them, to bring them back down to line. It's just like, we want you to have the same XP track, the same general XP as everyone else, but you did put in an extra effort, so you can maybe spend that XP maybe on a teamwork benefit.
Well, you're now inventing new financial instruments that the Securities Commission is going to want to have a look at.
Oh, yeah,
but
okay, fair.
It is a possibility. Why not? I mean, I think this year my thinking on all of this has evolved to the point where I look at everything on a character sheet and think to myself, why doesn't that go down as well as up? You know, why isn't this being spent at the same rate as, say, hit points or stamina or spell slots? So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Can we maybe go do a bit of a history dive before things? It's like, I think like people sometimes get confused as to why a system like this, like you'll have this new person who came in like 2 years ago for 5th Ed and has already been in like 5 5th Ed campaigns, 4 of which use mouse and XP perfectly, and 1 of which had a fiddly XP track system that they hate, and says like, why even have the system? Maybe I just like, sort of as a sort of side thing to our Tome of Gygax episodes, which are coming out. We've already have 5 episodes recorded this time.
You've been warned.
This is a threat.
So where does it come from initially?
Well, it's the Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson's method for running games is a lot closer to what we in the modern day would call an open table. He didn't have the same group of 5 to 6 gamers every time. Different people would show up at different times during Gygax's day, and assuming he had finished his insurance underwriting, he would put together a game for them. So he wasn't always going to be certain that he would have the same people. So the design of something like early D&D reflected that, and it had stuff like, well, each character has have their own XP pool, but it gets split up. So often people would have multiple characters, and they would be trying to sort of have their main character, their famous guy, their Tensors and Robulars and stuff, but also generally they'd have 2 or 3 side characters, or if Gygax was playing with a bunch of noobs for a day, they would bring in a new character, and XP was tracked on a character-by-character basis, and players in those campaigns were encouraged to have sort of a stable. In fact, I believe Gary eventually got to the point where he had 8 characters of significantly high level. He just said, yeah, I'm just going to have these guys go off, make a castle in the middle of nowhere, and just not worry about them. It's essentially the thing was just like, because he had a not a fixed party, but rather, as he's want to call it, a milieu of different factions and different people going into dungeons, friendships, rivalries, etc. It was more convenient to Gygax and Arneson to an extent as well to say, well, yeah, the fifth level people are going off on their stuff. There's this one guy who plays with me every afternoon, so he's at level 10, and then we have like groups of people around level 1 to 3, and they all track differently because they're all showing up and doing different things. And one of the other big elements of it was Gygax had his massive dungeons, which were dungeon level was a direct difficulty number. It was just like, if you want to have an easy time of it, just stay on dungeon level 1 and mop through what's there. That'll be good if you have very low level people who are just starting out. But there was rules to say, well, if a 5th level person runs around on level 1 of the dungeon, they will get 1/5 of the XP because they're just bullying those poor kobolds. But then there was a solid particular system of the dungeon level. It becomes exponentially harder as you go down, but also gives exponential rewards. It's just like and because every character's level, the XP requirements doubled, you were heavily incentivized to, you've probably got to the end of what level 1 can do. Time to go down level. Maybe you should go looking for shortcuts to get down to level 3 faster. So that had the effect that whenever a group came together in Gygax's living room, they would sort out between them, well, we're about average level 3, so we could probably go down to level 2 or level 3, but they could sort of self-select their own difficulty for this dungeon excursion. And that was the thing. It's just like they weren't on a pre-packaged module, because at that time Gygax did not understand that people might want pre-packaged content. He was very confused by the concept, but he had this sort of self-selecting difficulty slider because he had all his dungeon levels done out in this one thing, subsections, and people could go in, look around, say, this dungeon level seems to be about the right level for us. Let's go do this for the afternoon.
You can absolutely get some of the benefit of that system with a bit more verisimilitude in a sandbox setting. Well, like say with in-game knowledge, as in, okay, after asking around in the taverns and the local and talking to the local sages, the Hill of Ogres will probably be our doom if we go anywhere near it now. But if we go into the Forest of Goblins, like, we should be alright. We should be able to do stuff there. That's simplifying it a little bit, but that would also reward in an indirect way a party who actually puts the work in, to figure out what the world around them is like and engage more with the setting, which I'm a fan of.
Yeah, it's sort of like, do you want your players to be finding out by the ogre getting a crit on them and doing 60 points of damage, or do you want them to find out by asking NPCs, hey, how bad is the Hill of Ogres?
The latter, it would be my preference, because I don't like railroading PCs into death traps. I want them to get if I want them to get in there with through their own choices.
Yeah, so sort of create this system where if you take the time and you interact with people, get the information you want, that directly turns into an advantage in your adventure, whether it be your investigation or your trek across America or your dungeon dive. It's just like you turn that sort of information into, well, here's where all the rewards are, and this is how hard each reward is. Because you took the effort, this means you have more than just the big, obvious, glowing objective in the distance. You have these side things you could do, and you'll get rewards from doing those.
Yeah, that all sounds good from a GM and player point of view.
Absolutely, but again, it's sort of designed to suit this self-selecting sandbox game where like players are the ones choosing what they're doing in a given session. And they can choose, well, we were very tired this week. We would just like to go with the Forest of Goblins and bully some people just to blow off steam. Or maybe they're saying, no, this week we're all ready and hyped up. We're going to get a whole bunch of glue, some beehives, and that old rusty cannon we found, and we're going to take that Hill of Ogres.
What I'm hearing here is that in many ways we can't consider this question separate from the type of game or system you're using.
Yeah.
If it's level-based, it's one thing. But if you can spend XP on different stuff, it can work quite differently. Like, some games silo XP. Some games say you have earned social XP, or you have earned combat XP or non-combat XP. And combat XP buys better combat-related stats, and non-combat XP buys everything else. Or you have earned crafting XP. Crafting XP is used to make things. So that advances your gear. You know? And you can do things like that. And you can even do a kind of hidden version of it, like go, okay, you have earned new components to produce equipment with. So you can make yourselves new weapons or new armor. And this is the only way you get to make new weapons and new armor. So you go kind of down like an XCOM track or a Monster Hunter track where you're like, yeah, you can now make yourself new armor. You can make yourself Dragonhide armor. Is that better than regular armor? Yes, of course it is. That's why you do it. So it's you are gating the progression behind effectively different tasks, and you go, okay, instead of me giving you XP for killing the dragons, you get dragon parts for killing dragons. And dragon parts make dragon armor and dragon weapons. So away you go.
So that allows you to say, if you are keeping around milestone XP, you can say, well, also there's a bonus dragon over here, and here is Thargos the Dragonsmith, who can turn that into new armor for your tank. Do you want to try that, or are you just going to go straight for the objective and try to get the milestone? That's a player choice. But the sort of hidden back to the point element was just like, if you are just running through a pre-published module which tells you all the expected milestones, and your players are perfectly happy putting in just showing up effort every session, and none of them are really motivated by figuring out particularly complicated battle plans or writing up a diary between sessions, then if for that group, yeah, maybe just say once you get to, we'll give you 500 XP a session, or you'll get one advance every 2 sessions, or once you beat the Necromancer, you level up. Maybe that simple system is enough for your party, and or not. Like, that's sort of a call that a GM and a party has to make.
If you get more XP for showing up, are you more likely to show up?
It depends on why people are not showing up. If they're not showing up because they can't be bothered, half the time, that's one thing. If they're not showing up because they have to bring kids to the GA matches, that's a different story. Okay, guys, we'd have to start an entirely new episode to discuss why players do and don't come to your game. Fair. So I think there's no strictly right answer here. I think there's definitely a trend in games now
as they are played rather than as they're written to favour the everybody goes along at the same pace. But there are some interesting things you could do as long as you can sort of get your system to line up with it, that would allow you to maybe return to some sort of tracking or consider it next time you're putting together a game.
No, none of these tools have to be, you must do all of these. Try out different things. Like try out maybe your next game, you're going to track XP. Maybe next game, you're going to just give them bonus gear if they do side quests. Try out, see what happens to you, and, see what your group likes.
I have a few examples of some alternate systems that use some different things. If you want to look at one which uses basically just a pool of XP and you spend it on whatever you want, you can take a look at something like writeup. If you want to use one which doesn't hand out traditional XP, but your skills improve when you use them, you can take a look at Call of Cthulhu. If you're interested in a game which gives out no XP for player actions, or player completing quests or attending sessions, but instead only gives out the XP when your player sets an objective for themselves and then complete it, you can look at something like Soulbound for Age of Sigmar. There's a bunch of different tools out there where it's not just leveling. It's you actually get to spend you have to do things to earn your XP, and then your XP goes into more specific places. So there are other options out there worth taking a look from away from the monolith that is leveling by level.
As your glorious warlord, I'm more than happy to say Disparity is often decried as a horror of an unfair world, but at the same time, we are here to glorify the great warriors of the RPG tables and the ones that put in the effort and try new things. They deserve perhaps a little bit more from their gaming. So I would declare, forge your own path, bring up your broadswords, and see what gaming potential lies in messing around with your XP systems. But for now, our crusade is done, our blood has been shed, and this party is over. Thanks for listening to The Adventure Party. You can find show notes and links to things we've mentioned at www.theadventuringparty.net and on our Facebook page. You can leave comments there, or talk to our Twitter account at AdventurePTY, or you can record a voice message at www.speakpipe.com/theadventureparty. We can also be contacted directly by email at party@theadventuringparty.net. If you'd like to be in touch with the party all the time, come join our Discord server, link in the show notes. The Adventuring Party is released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike 3 license.